The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are favorites in the NFC South, but the Atlanta Falcons are ready to soar. We'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's episode, we're going to look at some non-division favorites and see which we believe in more. We'll talk about the AFC North with the Bengals and Steelers, hit the AFC West with the Broncos and Chargers, and then we're going to start with the NFC South. The AFC South, let's just leave that in the corner.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that after the season.
But the NFC South could be very, very interesting, and it got even more interesting this week. I'll explain. Before I do, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. But again, we got the news earlier this week that Tristan Wirfs suffered a knee injury, had a knee surgery, will be out at the beginning of the season. There's no real clarity right now on exactly how long that'll be. Obviously, recovery dictates that. But it makes you wonder because, in my opinion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are heavy favorites in the NFC South. But with this, they play the Falcons early. They have some tough games against tough opponents early. They could start out struggling at the beginning of the year without Wirfs, which could open up the door for someone else in the NFC South. And Ross, if you had to choose between the Falcons, who do have quite a bit of talent, versus a scrappy team like the Panthers that could surprise us, who do you think has a better chance of taking the NFC South away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Who's got the better chance is probably the Atlanta Falcons. Who I think can do it, it's probably those scrappy Carolina Panthers. I think the Panthers are better than most people are willing to give them credit right now. I think Atlanta made some really good moves over the course of the offseason. They drafted with the intent of trying to get themselves out of that 20-year pass rushing rut. If the Falcons are able to do that, then all of a sudden they'll be in a much better position. But I don't know that I have a lot of confidence they will be able to do that. And they still have the big glaring question mark of Michael Penix Jr. There's still a Kirk Cousins in the background, two quarterbacks, no quarterbacks, that whole situation. And so I have a little bit more confidence in the Carolina Panthers, but I think the team probably with the best chance would be the Atlanta Falcons in that case.
I'm with you there. And you know what, Ross? I don't think it's just us that has more confidence in the Panthers this year. And I don't think it's just us that has more confidence in the quarterback of the Panthers, because it seems like after a good end to last season, the guys in the locker room are believing in Bryce Young a little bit more.
And we see out on Tuesday that competitive spirit, a different kind of Bryce, because it's not a Bryce that we'd have seen even last year heading into last year's. What really matters is, do the guys believe in you? And they did not believe in him last year. And then he came around and they started to believe. He earned their trust. He earned their confidence and belief. And now, man, he's giving it back. And that's what you want to see, man.
I think that belief in Bryce Young going into this year that wasn't there last year and wasn't there during the games last year will make a difference for the players in the locker room. But like you said, they did make some good additions, getting Tetaroa McMillan in there for a big physical wide receiver. I like adding Rico Dowdle into the backfield. I think he's an underrated player that can create some explosive plays. They added a ton to help the defensive line. Tershawn Wharton and Patrick Jones in free agency. They draft Princely Omamielen and Nick Scorton in the draft to really help that pass rush. They add Trevon Moehrig in the defensive backfield, who I'm a big fan of at safety. So I guess, I don't know. I think I agree with you that the Falcons have more talent, and that's why my answer is the Atlanta Falcons. But I think we should maybe – there's stuff that happens in the NFL every year that we don't expect, and the Panthers stepping forward and maybe making a surprise run to the playoffs here as a wild card team or something, even if they don't take the NFC South, I still think that that's possible.
Absolutely. And remember, they're playing a third place schedule this year too, which is going to be a little bit tougher than their usual fourth place schedule. But even with a third
Usual
place
fourth
schedule, like
place.
still, yeah, right. But usually,
Sorry,
but still,
Panthers fans.
yeah, but I mean, they know where they're. They
Yeah,
listen
they
to
know.
Julian Council is probably like one of the most real hosts you're going to
Yes.
find on this network when it comes to talking about his team. And so for me, like looking at where they are and the opponents that they're going to have, the schedule that's ahead of them, the young talent that they have, ideally the coaching now moving into its second year and everything, like all of those things are going to make a big difference. And if they get the play out of Bryce Young, that's not even superstar level play, but that is just good game management, reliable quarterback competency, then I think they're going to be in a much better position than maybe many expect.
I agree with you there. Now, I did all that buttering up of the Panthers to say this. I'm taking the Atlanta Falcons if we're having this discussion. They just have much more talent. And listen, I think that the Falcons could potentially win the division if the Buccaneers do start off slow and the Falcons, hit the ground running with Michael Penix this year. They do have a lot of talent, but people in Atlanta, and listen to the Locked On Falcons podcast, have aspirations even higher than that.
I think that Atlanta's offense is going to be explosive. It's going to be big plays. You've got one of the strongest arms in the entire league. Drake London, I mean, I'm sure you've gotten into his statistics in those 3 games. They've got something special. Bijan Robinson's actually being used correctly. You still got Tyler Algier hammering away. Zach Robinson, a great no problems on offense. Defensively, if you can just hold up and you can get some turnovers, this is a team that can get to the NFC Championship game. Hell, they could get to a Super Bowl. And anything can really happen in the NFC, in my opinion. And look, it's not just James Pierce and Jalen Walker. You add a Leonard Floyd, you get Braylon Trice back. In the secondary, the emphasis was ball hawks, guys that are going to turn the ball over. And every GM says that the draft broke perfectly. They were stunned that Jalen Walker was there, stunned that they could get Pierce, stunned that Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman in the later rounds. They really did get everybody they wanted.
Now, there's stuff in there that I agree with, and there's stuff in there that I necessarily don't agree with, that people were stunned they could get James Pierce. No, they were stunned at what you gave up to get James Pierce, not that you could get him. That was the stunning part. But listen, I understand the sentiment, and hope springs eternal this time of year. You look at that Falcons roster, the talent they have on offense, a solid offensive line. Defensively, there is talent there. If they hit, then yes, it could be a lot better. But that defense is where I have a lot of my questions. And then, we can talk about all the offensive talent, but what is Michael Penix going to be? That's why I have said I am going to judge Michael Penix based on this year. I'm not going to give him a lot of, room. They have a great offense there. He's a pro-ready guy. He should be able to come in and win right away. And that's why if the Buccaneers do take a step back, I think it's the Falcons who ultimately win the division, not the Panthers, even if I think the Panthers can be like the Arizona Cardinals of this season.
Yeah, look, I think the Falcons are getting a lot of credit for their draft class, which is good, but we got to see how it pans out. The fact of the matter is that they drafted a lot of consensus guys like Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. that everybody thought were going to be good, despite some of the character questions around James Pierce Jr., talking about him on the field. Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman, all those guys that everybody was kind of high on going into this 2025 draft. And so when you draft a draft class that all of the analysts love, you're going to get a lot of love and everything's going to be positive there, but you still have to see how they actually perform out on the football field. So for me, that's going to be a big time outstanding question, because if those rookies don't pan out, then the Falcons defense is right back where the Falcons defense left off last season in being in the pits. And so unless, no pun intended, Kyle Pitts. And so unless those guys actually pan out and the quarterback pans out, then the Falcons are just kind of right back where they were last year. And it's going to take maybe another year of building up that defense and everybody kind of settling in. But I don't think they're as ready-made as maybe they're getting credit for because of their good draft class, because every draft class is in a massive question mark. So we got to see how all those guys pan out. But if every one of them pans out, I would take the Falcons to potentially win the NFC South, regardless of whether or not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take a step back. They'll challenge for the division, but if they want to, if they really want to make sure that happens, all those guys have to pan out. If they don't, they're right back in the dregs.
And look, I like Leonard Floyd. I think he's a good player, but is he a top tier premium edge rusher in the NFL? No, I wouldn't say that. And then you're relying, like you said, on rookies. And again, hope springs eternal. this time of year, everybody's rookies are going to pan out and they're all going to be gems that they find and everything's going to work. But relying on those two rookies along with Leonard Floyd, like that's a lot of question marks for a pass rush that you needed to have answers for after those moves.
And remember last year, we said the same thing about Matthew Judon, right? They brought in Matthew Judon, and he's been somebody that's been so effective his entire year. And then he, did not produce because he was asked to drop back into coverage a ton. So it doesn't matter if you're bringing in the guys that are really talented. I think Leonard Floyd's a very talented rotational pass rusher, would be good for you in a rotation. Completely agree with you. But if you're asking him to drop into coverage, you're not taking advantage of what he's doing. So you could bring in the guys that are really good at the things that they do, but if you don't ask them to do the things that they do, then you didn't bring anybody in. You know what I mean? So it's just as much about the scheme and the philosophy as it is about winning the offseason.
Yeah, the Falcons have had talent on their roster forever, and they are begging for coaching to come in there and elevate the talent that they already have, and we'll see if it happens in year 2. Of Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson. But with that being said, the AFC West could be up for grabs as well, and I know exactly who I think is going to win that one. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So in addition to just managing your money, you're also building wealth. For me, I didn't quite realize how much money I was spending on online shopping. Also, I've been getting into investing, and being able to track everything all in one place just makes it so much more efficient. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Ross, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We're looking at some potential division winners if the favorite does fall off. We both looked at the Falcons as a team that definitely can contend if they get things right, and with the Tristan Wirfs injury, they might have a chance to get off to a good start. But now we need to talk about the AFC West, where, Ross, I have to be honest, I have a hot take, and I am sticking with it throughout the entire preseason time here. Looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, let me just say this first. The Kansas City Chiefs have made a lot of deep postseason runs. All right, that's going to take a toll on the roster. I think they got worse on the offensive line this year, trading away Joe Thuney. They still have a major question mark at left tackle that I'm not certain if that's answered. Jawan Taylor, I think, is an overrated player. Trey Smith, I think he'll get his deal here in the next couple of days, if I'm honest with you, before the July 15th deadline for franchise tag guys to get their deal done before the season. But there are just questions there, all right? And now they've lost a Super Bowl. And we know with absolute certainty that the Super Bowl hangover for the loser is real. So you combine the years of deep postseason runs and the impact that would have, the lack of quality on the offensive line, and then actually losing the Super Bowl for once, I think we could see the Chiefs take a step back, and not that they'll miss the playoffs, but I think we could see another team win that division. And if it was between the Broncos and the Chargers, who both made the playoffs last year, very formidable, not only do I think this is if the Chiefs don't win, this team wins, I think this team wins the division anyway, and it's the Los Angeles Chargers. And you know why? Because Justin Herbert, and I think this is the year that Herbert really establishes himself as that fifth best quarterback in the NFL. And it's not just me that believes in him. His starting linebacker and one of the most underrated players in the NFL, Deion Henley, believes in him as well.
Man, I can say a whole bunch of more passionate words about him, because when I hear stuff like that, like dudes doubting Justin Herbert, it makes me get passionate, because I'm like, that's somebody I truly believe in. Like, we need him. And not to say anything about our backup quarterbacks, but when Justin goes down, bro, I'm on the sideline, I'm like, get up. Get up. You know what I'm saying? Like, get up, Justin. Like, that's so I don't even want to entertain people like that. That's you know what I'm saying? That's my little dissertation on the subject. But Justin is a guy. He is a guy. He's proven. Check the stat books.
I just love that from Tayon Henley. You guys
so
got to
awesome.
check out Locked On Chargers. Great stuff right there. But listen, this is what we talked about with Bryce Young. When your team truly believes in you, for example, I believe in Ross. Ross is my boss, per se. When you know that you could go to battle with somebody who you truly believe in, it changes the approach that you take. It changes your level of buy-in. And I think Herbert has proven to that team that he's good enough. And now the team needs to prove that they are good enough to support him. I think both things happen in year 2 of Jim Harbaugh. I don't care what happens with the Chiefs. The Chargers are winning the AFC West.
For what it's worth, I would go to battle for you and with you too. I mean, I think a lot of people feel that way about you and would run through a wall for you. So let me say that first. But here's what I'll also say. You talk about believing in a quarterback, and I don't think that there is a head coach out there that believes in his quarterback more than Harbaugh believes in Herbert.
Yep.
I mean, you see the way that he calls him the beast and all this stuff, that he's constantly praising him, constantly excited by him and about him, is consistently like on the sideline, losing his mind over the things that Justin Herbert is doing on the field and all that. Like, that relationship needs to be symbiotic, head coach, quarterback. And you have Andy Reid, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Sean Payton, you have Bo Nix. Sean Payton's one of the best relationship builders with the quarterback that you're going to find in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think that puts the Chargers in that conversation. Heck, I'd go Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. Pete Carroll knowing how to do it too. Like, this is a really good division for head coach quarterback relationships and kind of the blueprint of what that is. But the thing that's going to separate them is, what can you do outside of that? There are way more question marks right now about the Kansas City Chiefs than there ever have been. And there are way more exclamation points about the Los Angeles Chargers than it feels like there ever have been. You look at them shoring up the offensive line, adding Mekhi Becton. I think that was such a good move this offseason. But not only do they do that to protect Justin Herbert, but they go out there, they get Najee Harris. And so they also put a really good offensive line in front of their run game that they have struggled to get going since back in the, Josh Kelly, Austin
Since
Eckler
LaDainian
days.
Tomlinson,
really
man.
Since really, like, they really, you're right. Like, they really have not had a consistent rushing attack since then. Maybe Darren Sproles for a little while, right?
Yeah.
And so
Austin Eckler had his times where he was pretty solid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But even those two guys were more about what they could do all around. LaDainian Tomlinson was the running back. I mean, he could do the other stuff too, but he was the running back, right?
The GOAT, man. My favorite ever.
Man. Oh, man, absolutely. And so I think if they're able to revitalize not that rushing attack, but their rushing attack from what it has been, and get that to middle of the pack, middle of the road, all of a sudden that changes everything for your quarterback. And your quarterback's already performing well. The defense performs also already on this team. Like, there's a lot going on for this Los Angeles Chargers team. I think I'd have to take them in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's just something about year 2 of Jim. I just trust Jim Harbaugh's program. I don't know how else to say it other. I just trust him. I'm going to put my eggs in those basket. He is going to have a competitive football team, and with the talent that they have now that we talked about, I just think they're primed and ready to win like 12, 13 games. I just think they're going to be a really good team. The Chiefs will still make the playoffs. They'll go 11-5, something like that, but 11-6, 12-5 too. I just have a feeling. Now, I know that I've taken shots at the Broncos in the past, so this will feel like a shot for Broncos fans, but I'm telling you, year 2 of Bo Nix is going to feel different for the Broncos as well. And our guys at Locked On Broncos talked about the difference in the locker room with Bo Nix in there instead of the guy before.
I mean, it's evident. I see it daily, just how different the locker room is, how it responds to Bo in comparison to Russell. Look, guys loved Russell Wilson. There were guys that liked him, but there was just a different dynamic when he was in the locker room versus now, like when Bo's in that locker room. It just seems like there's a level of calmness. Like, you're not walking on eggshells, I think, in that locker room, so to speak.
And I agree. Here's an example for you. To me, it's like Russell Wilson, super rich, super successful, Super Bowl champion, superstar wife, had his own office at the Broncos facility. He felt like a guy who was above the rest of the team. And and maybe he should. And there's nothing that he could do. I know people have their complaints about his personality. There's nothing Russell Wilson could do to not make it feel like that, because he is way bigger as a player than all of those guys. Maybe having his own office didn't really help to that, but it would be like if someone was at the top of the mountain and yelling down at you, "Come on, you guys can do it. I'm up here, you guys can do it. And that's positive. But wouldn't it be different having your leader right next to you on the mountain? Like, come on, guys, we can make it. We can make it. It's just different. Like, Russell Wilson was already there and trying to pull everyone up when Bo Nix is there with everybody else, just as hungry and as helpful. So the Broncos are one of those teams where it's hard for me because we're probably not going to see 3 teams from the AFC West make the playoffs again. And obviously, I have more faith in the Chargers and the Chiefs, as I've explained. But the Broncos are awesome, and Sean Payton deserves a lot of that cachet and credit that I gave to Jim Harbaugh, too, maybe more. He's done it. He's won the big one. So I have a hard time dealing with what I'm going to do with the Broncos this year because they deserve credit, too, but it's just a crowded conference.
Yeah, it really is. And it's one that's going to cannibalize itself and everything. These are all 3 of these teams, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs, were all 10+ win teams last year. They're all double-digit win teams last year. And they probably will be or can be again because your 10-win team that had a rookie quarterback's going into his second year and your head coach is going into a second year with that quarterback, all that. Like the Russell Wilson thing, and I believe this for any time you pull off some kind of big trade to try to bring in a quarterback, particularly as a trade, when you're doing that, you're saying this is the savior for, this is the missing piece, right? If it doesn't work the first year, it's not going to work. Matthew Stafford worked right away for the Los Angeles Rams. That was the only way that was going to happen. The Broncos, Russell Wilson thing fell flat on its face right away. And so it was never going to work after that. Right. And so I think that was
Aaron
another
Rodgers
thing that really
in New York.
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah.
Boom, right away. Should have known.
Right. And so it's like, it's that thing, like that first year is pivotal when you're trading for that franchise quarterback to come and save your team. If it doesn't happen, then it ain't going to happen. And so I'm glad that the Broncos actually turned the page a little bit more quickly. I'll say the same thing for the Jets instead of trying to make this last longer than it needed to. And so I think that's what puts the Broncos in a really good spot. But I just think the Chargers are just a little bit more ready right now as a full team. And that's what separates it from me.
And Justin Herbert's better than Bo Nix, even though I think Bo Nix is good. You know what I mean? But Justin Herbert, I think, is great. But with that being said, we're talking about how crowded the conference is. What about the Cincinnati Bengals? Are they going to get back into the playoffs? Then what does that do with somebody else? And if the Ravens aren't going to win the AFC North, the Bengals didn't even make the playoffs last year, but they sure got a chance. All right, Ross, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Talked about the NFC South, the AFC West. Now I want to get to the AFC North, another great division in the NFL that I think we could see, the non-favorites really make a push here. Now, before we get into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting as training camp gets closer and moves are being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Ross, I don't know why, but I have a feeling that we may actually disagree on this one.
Okay.
If the Baltimore Ravens, who are the favorite in the AFC North, do not win the division, my pick is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I haven't loved the recent trade that they made, Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, giving away Minkah Fitzpatrick. I didn't necessarily like that move for them. But at the end of the day, Jalen Ramsey is still a very good player, and our guys from Locked On Steelers actually think that his level of play and his skill set is a better fit for what the Steelers need.
The most volatile position in football is corner. You know who hasn't been volatile ever in his career? Jalen Ramsey has never heard of a down season. He's never had one. You look at all of his stats, passer rating, targets allowed, his splash plays, his EPA per play, success rate, whatever you want to look at. Look at the tape. Everything checks off. This guy is still a good football player, and he is a versatile chess piece. And I think that's what really allures the Steelers about this trade is he can do so many different things for them in more than Minkah, which says a lot because Minkah did so much. Jalen Ramsey can do all that much more and open up possibilities for other people on their defense.
I mean, I agree with the analysis of Jalen Ramsey's versatility. Like, they're spot on there. But for me, it's DK Metcalf is better than George Pickens. Aaron Rodgers is better than Russell Wilson. Jonnu Smith is better than Darnell Washington. I think their offensive line got better as well. I just think the Steelers are better, and if the defense is just as good, if not a little bit better, like they're surmising that it could be, if I'm wrong about the trade and it actually did make them significantly better, I already thought the Steelers were going to be a playoff team. I like what they've done. I think the Mike Tomlin, Aaron Rodgers consistency there could lead the Steelers to a 12-5 record, an 11-6 record. And if the Ravens take a little bit of a step back at all and the door is open, which is what the premises we're discussing this under, is if the Ravens don't win, to me, I'm taking the Steelers, a team who made the playoffs last year and got better at key spots, over a team like the Bengals who maybe seems better, but didn't even make the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I got bad news for you, Tyler. I completely agree. I 100% agree.
Whoa!
The Cincinnati Bengals aren't even in the conversation for me. If I'm being completely honest, I have zero faith in where the Cincinnati Bengals can go because they've just not improved that defense. That defense is atrocious in Cincy. Yep. It's not getting any better. It was not Lou Anarumo's fault. It was the roster. There was not a lot of talent there. And you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they still have every element of that defense that they need. Alex Highsmith is still on that roster. TJ Watt, for right now, is still on that roster. You still have good corners, good safeties. You still have Joey Porter Jr. You still have so much there. And then you just made it even just marginally better with the acquisition of Jalen Ramsey. It's still a really, really good defense, like you highlighted. And I think that they're going to look better over on the offensive side. I'm a big Joe Burrow believer. I don't think that Joe Burrow is a top 5 quarterback. However, I think that if you give Joe Burrow Justin Herbert's receiving core, he's not in the conversation. If you give Joe Burrow Patrick Mahomes' receiving core, he's not in the conversation that he's in, all those other things. But I'm still very pro Joe Burrow. But I've also watched great quarterbacks not be able to win games because of a historically bad defense. 2015, 2015, 2016. I watched 3 of Drew Brees' best career years. 5,000-yard passing seasons, 40-plus yard touchdown seasons. 40-plus touchdown seasons, number 1, overall offense seasons. And I watched them 7-9, 7-9, 7-9, all 3 of those years. It's not a Joe Burrow question mark for me, even though I don't necessarily see him as the same way that everybody does. I still think he's a really, really good quarterback. And to me, it's not enough if that defense is still struggling. And that defense, by the way, still has a chance to get worse depending upon what happens with their ongoing feuds with their defensive players.
Yeah, Shamar Stewart, still unsigned. That's a volatile situation. And Trey Hendrickson, still unsigned. What's going on with that? They have to get those questions answered. I don't know that I agree with you in the take on Joe Burrow. I think that even with lesser receivers, he would still be in that conversation because I think he's that good. I think he was the best quarterback in the NFL last year, but obviously you're not going to get recognized for that sort of stuff when your team's that bad. Sure. I agree with you. I thought we were going to disagree on this, but I'm with you. That defense, just so many question marks. If you put Joe Burrow on the Pittsburgh Steelers,
done deal.
Is a championship contender. So with that in mind, I do got to go with the Steelers. But we talk about the Bengals defense. The offense could be so freaking good, though, that they're still in this thing. And Chase Brown, their running back, sounds like he might be taking a step forward. And if that happens, well, I'll let the Locked On Bengals guy explain.
There isn't a ton of risk with Chase Brown. But if he takes another step, we could be talking about an offense that is just so tough to stop. But if he takes another step forward, and he is what Dan Pitcher said he was, a top 10 back, if the Bengals truly have a top 10 running back, they've never had, you could make the case that they have the best quarterback in the league, best receiver in the league, another top 10 receiver, and a top 10 running back.
Now, you could make that case, but I would disagree. I would argue against that case. I don't think that T. Higgins is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I do think Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in the NFL. I don't think Chase Brown is anywhere close to a top 10 running back. Now, he could blow up this year. I just don't personally see the physicality necessary to be a top 10 running back, in my opinion. But I think we saw last year, the Bengals had an incredible offense last year, and it still wasn't enough to overcome the defense. I think the defense got worse. So, Ross, I'm going to have to go back and change the notes. I felt pretty certain you were going to disagree, but you're with me here. We're going Steelers.
Yeah, I got to go Steelers here, man. I don't have the belief in the Cincinnati Bengals defense to hold up its end of the bargain, no matter how good that offense is. And I'll say this too. I can't wait to hopefully at some day see Joe Burrow in a different jersey. I think that would be a really, really good thing for him. You got me excited when you talked about him as, putting him on the Pittsburgh Steelers and like what they can do.
Yeah.
If Joe Burrow ever gets out of Cincinnati and ends up somewhere else, he makes that team a lot better very, very quickly. So,
Bengals fans are going to find you and they are going to unalive you in some way, even given the visual of Joe Burrow in Pittsburgh. I mean, that would absolutely be a nuclear move in the NFL, which, hey, I'm here for the chaos and the content, but that would be nuts. Ross, I don't know what it is, but I hate stuff like that. Like, I want Joe Burrow to be on the Bengals forever. He's just a Bengal. He's just that guy. Even though I live in the area and I hate seeing all of these people happy and having a great quarterback when I've been deprived throughout my life, it just feels right. So I'm kind of a classic type guy.
You like a lifer.
Sense, but
yeah.
I
do think lifers are great stories. I do think lifers are great stories, but
I don't know. I like things you can count on. I just like consistency. You know what I mean? Yeah. Joe Burrow on the Bengals, it is what it is. But they better get their act together, or you're right. I mean, eventually he does. Do you see that clip of him on quarterback telling Zach Taylor they beat the Titans by 10 points? And he was like, we're an embarrassment. We're an embarrassment.
Yep.
But arguing with the coach. That's the kind of guy that takes winning so serious that he could leave money on the table and leave. And the Bengals have had a quarterback do that before. So scary times. The Bengals need to get this thing together. But with that being said, Locked On NFL is totally together, and that is going to do it for today's show. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Mastermind, Ross Jackson. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.